Welcome to the VALPRO PATH podcast, where we explore how Europe can build stronger and more sustainable plant protein systems from farming and processing to the food products on our plates. My name is Tamara Trninić Gondi, and I am from Future Systems Hub, formerly Foodscale Hub, the organization leading dissemination, communication, and exploitation activities within VALPRO PATH. In today's episode, we'll talk about the practical side of Europe's protein transition, supply chains, business models, and the real challenges behind bringing plant proteins to consumers in a way that works for farmers, businesses, and the food industry alike. It's my great honor to introduce my guest today, Melania Zanforlin, a PhD candidate at Wageningen University, and Tamara Glišić Krivošija, Deputy Head of Exploitation from Future Systems Hub. Together, they are working within the VALPRO PATH project to better understand how protein value chains can be more connected, resilient, and economically viable. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tamara.
Melania, I think that a good opening question for this conversation is when we talk about supply chains in the context of plant proteins, what does that include?
Yeah, well, it's quite a broad question in the sense that supply chain in the context of plant proteins can include multiple parts of what we think about the supply chain. So this can mainly go from farm to plate. And in the field where I work, that is logistics, we look at these as a series of layers, which are technically called echelons. So it all starts at the primary production stage, where you have the fields and you grow the crops. And then you move all the way to post-harvesting, handling, and all the kind of pre-processing and processing steps that include also food manufacturing. And finally, you get to the retail and the consumer. What is essential for supply chain design, that is the work I do, is to draw boundaries for the supply chain that entirely depend on the goal that you have for your own model. So you can have a single layer or multiple layers models. And as you can understand, as more layers are included, then the mathematical complexity of the model will increase. And this brings me to what Tamara actually does, because she looks at short supply chains, where actually the model I would build, in that case, it's much easier and simpler to solve.
Yeah, Tamara, as Melania mentioned, one of the VALPRO PATH innovation production systems focuses on short supply chains, and this includes different business cases, the production of plant-based burgers, and developing the peanut industry in Europe. Could you please elaborate on these cases and explain what makes these supply chains actually short?
Yes. Well, within our first innovation production system, we are tackling short supply chains through on-farm processing. So basically, we have two business cases that are tackling this topic, and the idea is to enable predominantly farmers and local producers to create more value, so more value stays with them at the farm gate before reaching the rest of the steps within the supply chain. I will give an example. So, for example, the first business case that we are tackling here is the production of a veggie burger in Italy, where legume crops as lentils and chickpeas are being transferred at the farm level into value-added products. So basically here, the farmer is not only creating raw materials that go into further steps of the supply chain, but they are at the meantime acting also as processors, as logistics actors, and also as retailers, basically, because they are applying a B2C business model, business to consumers, and they are reaching out to local consumers in order to sell their final product, which is in our case a veggie burger. When it comes to the second business case, we are dealing with the European peanut development. So here, the idea is also to enable farmers, in this particular case in Portugal, that are breeding peanuts, to select the varieties that have potential to grow commercially here on European soil. This is not the case across all Europe, but in some pedoclimatic regions, so to say, it's more viable to grow peanuts than in some others. So the idea of the business case is to have quality feedstock and see what varieties can be grown in Europe, and to create these short supply chains in order to enable the farmers that are growing them to create also various food and feed applications for their products. So, for example, in our business case, we are testing the production of peanut milk, peanut butter, and peanut oil by applying different technologies and equipment that are being installed at the farm level. And there is also another side to the story, because we can also do side stream valorization when it comes to peanut shells, which can be also applied in feed and other applications. So the whole idea of VALPRO PATH is to test these hypotheses, so to say, these business cases in real environments, and see whether we can create these short value chains with the main objective to increase the value for the farmers and local producers themselves.
Yeah, this is just one way on how VALPRO PATH actually brings new innovations and added value. We will talk about it some more later. But before that, Melania, looking at the current plant protein value chain, where do you see the biggest bottlenecks today?
Yeah, well, there are many bottlenecks, I would say, but from the logistics and optimization perspective, I see two major bottlenecks. The first is the supply volatility driven by climate. So not only climate change, but just in general, climate can be uncertain. You don't know how to predict it properly. And specifically for crop legumes, this can be risky for farmers to grow due to the unpredictability of the weather. For instance, in one of the studies I worked on for VALPRO PATH, we focused on Italy, and we looked at how high wind speeds can cause the lodging. That is basically the bend over of crop legumes due to wind. And because of lodging, there are several, there are several issues related to the yield losses for farmers. And if the supply chain is volatile, then all the rest of the other processing steps that are after the harvesting are unstable as well.
Yeah.
And the second bottleneck is instead related on infrastructure mismatch, because currently the European infrastructure is built for animal feed when it comes to crop legumes and not for human food. And when we talk about shifting from feed to food, or including both of the products, this would require completely different processing pathways. For instance, VALPRO PATH work on dry fractionation or wet extraction for isolate proteins. And all of this infrastructure in many regions in Europe is either not developed or entirely missing. And well, this is a key issue when it comes to logistics and supply chains. And yeah, there's need of many more studies on this to fully understand what to do.
Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing this with us. And one of the key bottlenecks is the lack of processing facilities. And one of the IPSs, as you already mentioned, is focused on optimizing processing steps, including the technologies used.
Yes, I would like to add here that we also have a business case dealing with technologies when it comes to processing. So VALPRO PATH is trying to find the processing steps that can be used when it comes to legume crops, but that can be done closer to farm in order to avoid this gap that has been mapped. So the lacking of this processing infrastructure across Europe. So the business cases are focused on testing different processes. For example, in VALPRO PATH, we are testing dry fractionation. So, for example, compared to wet fractionation, dry uses, of course, less water. It uses less chemicals, but it is also less energy intensive. So this enables us to create more sustainable processes, so to say, that are also economical from a market point of view as well. So, for example, in one business case, we are creating flowers from pea and faba bean, and we are looking into applications when it comes to legume-based pasta. But in order to make it properly, we need to test the technologies, and this is something that is also being done within a certain innovation production system. I think with Orcs University.
Thank you very much, Tamara. Melania, when we talk about decentralized plant protein value chains, what are pros and cons, and how does intercropping fit into the picture?
Yeah, well, this touches really the heart of my research. And first, I want to give a bit of context, because in logistics, when we talk about decentralized value chains, we mean where processing happens closer to the farm or in smaller regional hubs, more in general. And decentralized value chains have clear pros and cons that are clearly shown by our optimization models. So the pros are specifically that decentralization is great for local economies and can reduce the need to transport heavy, sometimes wet or even watery materials with unrefined biomass over long distances. And they're instead located right after the harvest location. For instance, I worked on a case study for Irish faba beans, and we saw that for purely economic objectives, having some decentralized or on-farm post-harvest facilities can work very well. When talking about the cons, what we lose are the economies of scale, which means that, for instance, in the studies I worked on, we found that if the goal is to purely maximize the protein yield or optimize for environmental objectives, then the model prioritizes centralized configurations simply because it's all the materials are located in one single facility. And also, as consumer demand and land allocation grow, then the math, so the model pushes all of the system to be more centralized. And part of the question was about intercropping. Intercropping here is another key aspect, and it adds another logistical layer to the entire problem, because when we include intercropping, that is basically growing multiple crops in the same field at the same time, then the mathematical complexity of the problem, of course, increases, as you can imagine. I looked, for example, on a case study of intercropped peas and faba beans in Italy, where, as I mentioned a bit earlier, peas tend to lodge, so to bend, and faba beans offer structural support to prevent lodging. So on the upstream part of the supply chain, so right after harvesting, this seems a clear advantage. But then you go into other logistical challenges, because if the crops are growing together, but you want to use them for different purposes, then you would need to sort them to separate the multiple crops grow together. And logistically speaking, this is quite a problem. And if you want to get other ingredients out of intercropped crops, like flowers, protein extracts, etc., these can increase the cost and environmental impact of the supply chain.
You mentioned that this is a problem, but how do you see the solution of this problem?
Yeah, well, you need to create mathematical models, as I do, to clearly identify the trade-offs and if it's actually beneficial to intercrop and with which ratio it's better to intercrop. And then you can identify how much intercropping adds value to your supply chain.
Thank you for sharing this. And Tamara, I'm sure you have something to add because a key focus of VALPRO PATH is actually intercropping, as Melania already mentioned, and the transformation of crops into flour and high protein confectionery products. Could you expand on this and share exactly which crops are transformed?
Yes, when we are talking about VALPRO PATH within the scope of the project, we are testing intercropping, as Melania said, between peas and faba beans in order to prevent lodging. So in the long run, this reduces the yield loss when it comes to peas, and from a logistical point of view. So basically, when we look at the supply chain, this is an important step in securing reliability of raw materials when it comes to peas in this case. However, this raw material then needs to go into further processing, so to say, downstream. And then we have the challenge that Melania mentioned, whether we do a separation of peas and faba beans or we try to process them together. So the business case that we are tackling in Ireland within VALPRO PATH, it deals directly with this challenge. So the idea is to use flour coming from both crops within confectionery products that are already familiar on the market. So we are talking about waffles, soda bread, cookies, so different bakery products that are mainly made from wheat flour. The idea within this business case is to do a wheat flour substitution, and we are aiming for a 30% substitution rate, but with pea and faba bean flour, so to say, to make hybrid formulations in food applications. In food applications. So far it is going well, and the idea is basically to avoid retooling and equipment changes when it comes to processing facilities, because as Melania mentioned, this increases the costs. So this process should not increase the costs for the processors, but also we have an important perspective from the consumers, because introducing legume flours introduces bitterness when it comes to the taste of the confectionery products. So basically the recipe is key when it comes to making these products. We need to create them in a way that they are in texture and the taste similar to what we already have on the shelves, and to also have a comparable shelf life when it comes to the end products. So we are looking forward to the results from this business case. And so far, to my knowledge, I know that our colleagues at Chagas managed to increase even above 30 the substitution rate when it comes to the hybrid formulation for these confectionery products.
So this is also, when we talk about supply chain optimization, this is also part of that, as you mentioned. But Melania, I was just wondering, when we talk about supply chain optimization, what are some key steps that need to be taken that are already underway within VALPRO PATH project?
Yeah, so when talking about supply chain optimization, what we mean is using mathematical programming to find the best solution that is called technically optimal solution, which in the specific case of VALPRO PATH is finding the supply chain configuration that works the best. Optimization can be done for one or multiple objectives, such as greenhouse gas emissions, cost, or many other objectives. The key step that we need to take, and that is what we are actively working within VALPRO PATH, is to map out how these chains can scale up under real world conditions, such as climate change, uncertain climate conditions, and uncertain consumer demand, and so on and so forth. We are building supply chain models that don't only look at the cost minimization, but at the same time try to optimize for all kinds of different environmental impacts like carbon footprints, water use, or even energy consumption. And within the project, the models that I've been building are a kind of test bed. So we plug in real data and input from all the other partners for specific case studies. And then we evaluate the different processing pathways. For example, I worked on how propionic acid or drying for feed can work better within the Irish supply chain. But yeah, there are many other examples of how you can do this, considering, for instance, climate conditions or intercropping ratios, as we talked about. Just to sum up, VALPRO is moving forward by creating mathematical concepts needed to transition from a more fragmented or risky farming for crop legumes to a more structured and coordinated systems through models.
And how do you see actually these models later used in some form by relevant actors and wider community?
Yeah, well, hopefully the results from the models we are building could be helpful for policy making and for identifying bottlenecks or, for instance, how to build the infrastructure for processing where it doesn't exist. So I hope this work will be helpful for not only for VALPRO PATH, but just beyond in the future.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on great results that you already have. And Tamara, we also covered a lot of innovations today. And if you had to summarize it, are these innovations actually helping transform plant proteins from a fragmented sector into a coordinated and scalable system? And how do you see these efforts as the foundation for building a truly connected plant protein system from farm to plate?
Yes, I see that these innovations that we're tackling in the project clearly point in that direction. Within the project, we are trying to connect the missing links across the plant protein value chain. So we are tackling different parts of the supply chain, of the value chain, but not individually, but through an integrated collaborative approach. So for example, at farm level, we are dealing with the intercropping that has already been explained previously, but there is also another important aspect at farm level, and we are developing a varietal selection tool, which provide an answer which crop should be grown in which climatic region in order for us to have greater yields and greater success at the same time. Stability when it comes to raw material production for the supply chain. So this is one aspect only, but then we are also dealing with the processing aspect of crops by valorizing different technologies, testing different technologies for different legumes, and to find out what works for each application. And we are also creating different ingredients. In some cases, it's a flour. In some, it's a concentrate or a isolate. And the important thing is that we have real life applications for the work that we are doing. And this is in VALPRO PATH valorized across various food applications. So the circle is full, and at the end we have these various food applications, such as the legume pasta that has been previously mentioned, but also a plant-based beverage. We are also experimenting with bars. There is the veggie burger. So a lot of food applications that are not so present at the market today, but have a lot of potential to become so.
Melania, do you have anything to add for the end?
It was amazing to be here, so thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a pleasure for me to work for VALPRO PATH and to be interviewed today.
Thank you very much for sharing such important insights today and for this great conversation. And congratulations once more to the great work that you are both doing within VALPRO PATH project. Dear all, thank you very much for following us and for watching VALPRO PATH podcasts. We'll be back soon with another interesting topic, so make sure to follow us on social media.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.